7 o'clock. We would like to inform all board member attendees, board meeting attendees, that this meeting is being live streamed and archived for access at any time by our community members on the internet within 24 to 48 hours of the meeting's conclusion. As was stated on the board agenda, this meeting is open to the public and in accordance with Phase 4 guidance issued by the Illinois Department of Public Health and the Illinois State Board of Education. Individuals are required to wear a face covering at all times while in the building, and during the board meeting, the capacity in any room is limited to 50. And seats will be spaced a minimum of 6 feet apart. If you choose to go outside, you may remove your mask, but please remain 6 feet apart from others. Attendees are expected to follow these guidelines or will be asked to leave the building. We appreciate everyone's understanding and willingness to abide by these expectations for our collective safety and health, and we will rise for the pledge. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
A roll call.
Mrs. Barber.
Here.
Mr. Carey. Here. Mrs. Pavlak.
Here.
Mr. Rivas.
Here.
Mrs. Witt, Mrs. Junk, and Dr. Lawler are absent.
Okay, with 4 members present, we do have a quorum. Would anyone like to move something from consent to new business? Seeing none, we'll move on to the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
And a second? Ryan? Yep, and a roll call.
Mr. Carey. Aye. Mrs. Pavlak.
Aye.
Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Mrs. Barber.
Aye. Motion carries 4-0. Is there any public comment tonight? No? Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda consists of the following action items: approval of Treasurer's Report July 2020, approval of minutes from July 27th, 2020 regular meeting, approval of resignation and employment of staff, approval of destruction of audio recordings from closed session meetings from January 2019, approval of motion not to release executive session minutes from January through June 2020, and the informational item, the Freedom of Information Act report. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
It's like Gail and a second by Ryan, is that okay? And a roll call.
Mr. Carey. Aye. Mrs. Pavlak.
Aye.
Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Mrs. Barber.
Aye. Motion carries 4-0. So we will move on to new business, J1, approval of amended school calendar for 2020-21.
Yes, as an update, if you recall, we did have a amended calendar at our last meeting, and we do have some changes for tonight. I will walk through what those changes are, and we do recommend action from the board tonight to try to ensure that our staff has enough time to prepare for the beginning of the school year on the AB and remote model, in addition to also with enough time for staff to make sure that we have plenty of materials and supplies and that we are ready to go for students on the 20th. We do have a few changes. The first 2 changes, Thursday, August 13th and Friday, August 14th, which would have been, or which originally were designed to be the first 2 student days, are now being moved to remote learning planning days. If you'll recall, under the governor's guidance, each district is allowed to have 5 remote learning planning days, and those days count as student attendance days. So this Thursday and Friday, Directors of Ed Service, along with our association and staff, are creating plans to ensure a successful transition to the school year for both the AB model and also remote planning for those that are teaching in that model. Then the other days that we were supposed to have, today traditionally is our kickoff day with our large outing in the auditorium, and then from there we break out into smaller groups. So today, tomorrow, and Wednesday, those 3 institute days are just getting pushed back 1 week. So it's August 17th and 18th are proposed to be institute days, teacher institute days. Again, continue to do work, continue to work towards opening of school, and then Wednesday the 19th is now our parent institute day. So we've shifted shifted the 3 days and added 2 remote learning planning days, and therefore students now are coming back on August 20th, on Thursday, for the A students and all remote learners on site, and the B students are at home for their application day, and then Friday that flip-flops with B on site, and A at home with their application day. To make up for those 3 days that we just moved the school year back, the 3 days are recommended to be added to the end of the school year. So those 3 additional days are May 20, May 21, and May 24. So our last day now, based on this schedule, is Monday, May 24th. And then you'll also see in the memo or in the calendar, the yellow days or orange days are now the emergency days, or they are emergency days. Those days have been pushed back from to be May 25th through June 1st. So those days are the new emergency days, and what we would share is with the ongoing changes and the ongoing guidance, that's what we recommend tonight. That is what we have set, but we'll have to see as the school year moves on to see if any of those days need to be shifted or adjusted into the future. But again, that comes through board action, so we would make sure we bring any of those changes to the board. Any questions on the recommended calendar changes or amended calendar changes for the school year?
I know we don't take action on this, but is there going to be a new AB calendar that's put out, or is it just that?
Yeah, that will be updated. Well, excuse me one second.
It would just be that
Patrick or-
first Wednesday, right?
Yes, Patrick or Sarah, can you come to the mic to make sure people can hear you? I just want to make sure that we're accurately reflecting President Sparber's question.
Yes, we updated it this afternoon,
Thank you.
and it should be going out to parents shortly. But it is reflective of the potential changes.
Perfect.
All the Wednesdays.
All the Wednesdays?
All the Wednesdays.
It's balanced now, yep.
Perfect.
Thank you.
I just noticed something else, and I don't know I'm just curious. If you look at first semester versus second semester, there's 20 days different in the total number of days per semester. Is that something that you adjust, or is it always like that and I've never noticed before?
There's always it's always slightly imbalanced. Due to the spring, there are more days for testing, AP testing, student testing, so we lose more days. So traditionally, the second semester has more days built in. But for this semester, or for this year, the goal is still to finish the first semester at the winter break or Christmas break. So therefore, we didn't, to ensure that happens, we didn't rebalance the semesters, because that would put us into January. So we do know that there is a larger imbalance than before due to moving back the 3 days. So there's always a slight imbalance, but it's just more pronounced this year due to these 3 days.
The second semester also includes the emergency days, so if we didn't use them, it actually would be slightly closer.
I think it's 9 days. I think 9 days, and then once we take off a few of the other testing, that becomes a little closer.
Okay.
Any other questions?
No, just a comment that I'm glad we're still able to hold the end of the second quarter prior to Christmas break.
Yeah, I think our year-long classes won't be as impacted. Our semester classes, we'll have to look at that, maybe adjust their curriculum a little bit to account for that.
Okay, so I'd like to entertain a motion that the Board of Education approve the amended school calendar for 2020-21 as presented.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second, sure.
And a roll call.
Mrs. Pavlak?
Aye.
Mr. Rivas?
Aye.
Mrs. Sparber?
Aye.
Mr. Carey?
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0. We'll move on to J2, approval of Illinois Central Contract Amendment.
Yes, I'll turn this one over to Dr. Fuchs, and you can please provide an update.
Certainly, thank you. Currently, the district continues to contract with Illinois Central for the transportation services for our students with special needs. We own our own bus fleet, and we typically do a lot of routes for our own regular ed students. But for Illinois Central, just like they did last spring, they are asking that should we go 100% remote, they will still need to pay their bus drivers. And so with that being said, they are asking the board to commit to 82% of the contract that we currently have in place. That payment would be used to cover the salaries of the bus drivers and the bus monitors. It would also include no overhead insurance or bus payments. Those overhead things would be covered by Illinois Central. ISB will continue to reimburse the district for any expenditures that we have, and they do continue to encourage us to work with our contractors. In order to do that, we do need to do the contract amendment, and so that's what you see on page 2. And so it pretty much goes through school year 2021.
And this is for outplaced students, so it doesn't necessarily matter what, if Kaneland's in session or not, or remote or not, it depends where all these students are going, correct?
It does, but typically they will follow our schedule,
Okay,
in most cases.
okay.
The previous time we faced this, we were encouraged or we were told we needed to do this?
Back in the spring,
Correct.
also encouraged. There were certain mandates that we did have. This was not one of them, but the board took action to do this similar thing back in the spring.
Back in the spring, though, didn't we have reassurances from the state that they were still going to pay the reimbursements?
And we still have those assurances.
Reiterated?
Yes, in July. July 27th? Yes.
Any other questions?
I
Is there
struggle
any-
with this one.
Is there anything unique or different than the previous time?
Not that I'm aware of.
From the spring? No,
Yes.
it's the same.
Which part do you struggle with, Ryan?
Paying people to do nothing?
I think one challenge is if you go on and off, you'll want bus drivers there.
No, I get the bigger picture of
Yeah.
if we don't do this, then there's chances we won't have bus drivers to pick up the kids, and I get it.
Right.
I still just kind of struggle with, sure, have some money.
Do other districts use this, these vendors, if you will?
Yes, they do. They service several districts in the area for various transportation needs.
Correct.
Some districts use them for regular ed, others use them for regular and special ed. It just depends.
And they're compliant as well, that you know of?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. They work it out individually with their districts, depending on what their needs are. But more often than not, yes, they were.
And why are they asking us to do it now?
In preparation for full remote, because there are so many districts in the area that already are. So currently, if they transport our students, we'll pay our regular bill. This is in the event that throughout the school year, if we go remote, this is in place and they know how to handle it.
And we are assured that we're gonna be paid back from the IS, whatever it be.
From the state.
It's their intention to do that.
Intention, I like that.
Yes. But we have traditionally, correct?
Yes.
Year over year, this has been one of the reimbursed. Okay.
So we're whole from when it happened in the spring?
No, because we haven't even submitted our claim yet for transportation. It's due this week, and then they start paying us this year. It's always paid the year after. So June 30th was the end of the fiscal year. So we submit all of those expenses, and I'll turn those in this week. Then they will turn that into the dollar amount that comes back to the district, and they'll pay us in 4 quarterly payments as they have the available cash.
And when, in 4 quarter, so they split it into 4 quarterly payments?
That's correct. Those are those mandated categorical payments.
Right. So we won't know until the end of the year whether we got paid, we were whole with them from last year, right?
Correct. But that's not unusual. That's a pretty normal cycle.
So they tell us they're going to pay us, but they don't actually send us the money till later on.
That is true.
In a year.
Throughout the
But
year,
that's-
they'll send us payments as the cash becomes available. We'll know how much they'll owe us, we'll have that total, and then they'll pay us in 4 payments.
Hopefully. But that's irrelevant to what we're talking about tonight. They're always late paying their bills, so.
Right. In 2019-20, we did receive 4 payments. 1 was from the 17-18 year, and 3 were from the 18-19 year. So when we get our first payment this year, it will actually be from the 18-19 year, and then they'll start in the 19-20 payments. So they're 1 payment behind right now. But at some point, they've always caught up to this point.
Well, we have an intent then, right?
Mm-hmm.
Any other discussion? All right, then I'll entertain a motion that Board of Education direct the administration to execute the amendment to the Illinois Central contract with the terms presented in the attached contract amendment for the 2020-21 school year. I'll make that motion. Is there a second?
A second.
Gail will second it. In a roll call?
Mrs. Pavlik,
Aye.
Mr. Rivas,
Aye.
Mrs. Barber,
Aye.
Mrs. Junk,
Aye.
Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. We'll move on to J3, approval of resolution authorizing notice of non-renewal of identified support staff.
Yes, I'd like to ask Dr. Atkins if you would come up to the presentation area and share the update for J3.
Good evening. I'd like to first start off by saying, as a reminder to the board, that this kind of process involves an honorable reduction in force for this staff member. The staff member is an excellent staff member that provides a very specific service to one of our students. Unfortunately, with the current pandemic situation, that student is unable to attend school this year, and as such, being a one-on-one for that student, we do not have need for that employee any further, so we notified her well beyond 30 days to let them know that we would be reducing that staff member in force. So they will be released. They do have, as a reminder again to the board, recall rights for 1 year from today. So should we have need of that group of employee moving forward, or even that student themselves come back, anything like that, this employee is subject to recall and would have rights to a position before we open up a position. So we are asking that the board approve the reduction in force of the specific personnel.
Any questions?
Is the student not returning because of what we're going through, or they moved away, or?
I wouldn't want to get into specifics of student information.
I'm not asking for names. I'm just, where I'm going with this is, if that family decides to come back or bring that student back at the, whatever, half of the year, whatever, then that person, we're able to call a person back if they're available.
That's the recall right that I was speaking to, absolutely. And we would want to. The specific personnel that we're talking about is an excellent employee.
Any other questions?
Nope.
All right, then I'll entertain a motion that the administration, that the Board of Education approve the wait, I'm in the wrong one here. I'm like, why does that not make any sense? The Board of Education approves resolution authorizing honorable dismissal of specific educational support personnel.
So moved.
And is there a second?
Second.
And a roll call?
Mr. Rivas,
Aye.
Mrs. Barber,
Aye.
Mrs. Junk,
Aye.
Mr. Carey,
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlik.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. We'll move on to J4, approval of press, first reading.
Yes, in the policies, you will see, fortunately, there's only 7 this time, so it's a smaller one in comparison to a few of the previous ones. Also, as I get ready to share the update, each of the pages are numbered at the top center, so while I will go slow, I'll still also maybe highlight the page number to make sure that you can follow with us. The first one for the school board meeting procedure, that one basically outlines the expectations during, or expectations for a quorum during the emergency disaster declaration. And so we have been following and do follow those. One of the things that they do highlight, again, is that there needs to be the on-site quorum if there is anybody to attend off-site, and the only reasons to attend off-site are the ones already listed in our policy. So this just reinforces our current practice and what's expected for us to be able, it's expected for us to be able to operate board meetings in public during this special time. Are there any questions?
Do we have any leniency on that? Like, let's say I decide it's too dangerous to come to a meeting and that's my reason for staying home. Can we include that, or is that not something we're allowed to change?
That would be, right now in our board policy, that is not one of them, but if the board wanted to entertain new policy, that's something the board could look at. Then we would also have to make sure within any of those changes that there's not a violation of the Open Meetings Act and that it does follow the guidelines for open meetings.
I thought that would be, but maybe I'm wrong. Are you thinking it might not be?
Well, if as a board we decide we want to do that, right now, even within this, the board president has some leniency in which to still call a meeting via Zoom. So we still could do that if we wanted. We just have to make sure that we can clearly articulate at this time why we're doing that. And then as far as updating the policy, that is our board policy. So if this board chose to have that dialogue, we could include that.
And are you speaking then during the emergency? That's what this policy is, separate from if we aren't in an emergency? Or are those
It applies
one
for
and the same?
both.
For both?
It applies for both still, yes. So the emergency, if a board member wanted to attend from home, I think it's, if they needed to, not wanted to, but if they needed to, I think it lays out the personal illness or disability, employment or district business, or family or other emergency. So as those three are met under our current, if one of those three are met under our current policy, a board member could attend the meeting virtually.
And I would suggest that, I'm going to use myself as an example. Let's I decide that COVID's too dangerous. My wife's got something or another. I'm not going out in public. That seems to me to be a reasonable thing to include in our policies, that as long as we have a quorum present physically, that a board member should have the option to do whatever they think is best in their situation.
Okay. Other discussion? Thank you for that. Other
I
thoughts?
totally agree, totally
Yeah, I
agree.
do too.
Times have changed. We have to adjust.
So you're still thinking, and I think this is what we're saying, that you still have a quorum present?
Correct. Physical quorum present, but if I decide I'm not coming, I'd rather have the input of that board member than have them just not participate.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be curious what Maureen said. I felt like, our attorney, I felt like I had asked her that question, but it was a bit, not direct. You know, it was in the midst of other things. So
Right.
if you could verify with her, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, I can provide that update when we bring it back.
Yeah, okay. Are we all good if that change is made, assuming it's fine with the attorney? Looks like it.
Providing there's an on-site
Okay.
quorum. Okay. Second one is a fund balance update from our auditor, so I'll turn that one over to Dr. Fuchs, and you can provide an update for us, please.
Thank you. On page 7 is our current fund balance policy. In order to be compliant with GASB 54, the auditors gave us a new fund balance policy template that I have modified, making it for Kaneland, and then had them review it. They've been doing this in our audits where they identify the various governmental funds and then how it's identified. Now our policy is in compliance with our practice, which is GASB 54 compliant. I just want to point out that at the end on page 12, our current policy language is still in there. So our balance and our cash on hand with the 45 days and our action that the board has to do is still in here. It just includes the rest of the language that makes the policy compliant with GASB 54.
Simplified it, right?
Always.
Sorry.
Yeah, it turned a half a page into 4.
Right.
Yeah, it's simple. Thank you.
I mean,
No further questions or any feedback? Okay. The next policy, 4180, is the Pandemic Preparedness, Management, and Recovery. If you look on page 14, there are 3 questions that the board needs to entertain, and we have a recommendation for those 3. Right now, the first question is your district served by an intermediate service center rather than ROE? That one is no. That, as you can see, the parentheses behind it, that's suburban Cook County. They're served by ISCs. We are not. We have an ROE, so the recommendation is no, the default on that one. The second question is a default 2 if the superintendent and the board president, as we implement our pandemic or emergency executive orders, do we do that through the board or do we do that through the policy committee? And that one is no, because we don't have a policy committee. We do, some districts have a policy committee, and on nights like tonight, a policy committee member would come back and provide these updates, but with our board, it goes to the full board. So that answer to the second question is no for the default, because we don't have a board policy committee. Then the third question is the remote learning days versus e-learning days. If you recall, I think it was either June or July of last year, before this entire situation of COVID-19 hit us, one of the things we were talking about was the interest and the feasibility of doing a e-learning plan for the district for the emergency days, for the 5 emergency days. At that point, we tabled that, went into the school year, and ended up using remote learning. But under this specific question, the answer to this one is no, because we do not have an e-learning plan. The e-learning plan is the one we would specifically bring to our board for emergency days. What we shifted to was a hybrid model and remote learning days and blended remote learning days. So at this point, the answer to number 3 is no, because it's not the state-approved e-learning plan. It's a remote learning plan.
Okay.
Any questions on any of those 3?
So Todd, does that affect us if we do go to a full e-learning? Does this somehow apply to it?
No, at this point,
Or at the same time, are we pushing forth to also get a certified, if you will, plan that we can use?
good question. At this point, no. At this point, our hybrid model and our remote learning and remote blended plans meet the needs and the requirement of the state right now for the plan to start the school year. If, when we go back to, I guess we could do an e-learning plan now, but our e-learning plan would probably be equivalent to what our remote learning plan is, and we spent our time formally getting our remote learning and remote blended plan along with the hybrid model, all of that together, all of those make up our plan for this year. A specific e-learning plan follows a different set of working together with our associations, doing a public, I think you put it on public display, the board has to approve it. All of those things would be a formal e-learning plan, and we don't have the time or the inclination to shift our remote plan to a formal e-learning plan.
And that was mostly for like snow days, right?
The 5 emergency days. It was built into the 5 emergency days, and I do believe that through our Regional Office of Education, that if we do have snow days this year, our remote learning plan would also double for our emergency days. So if we do have emergency days with snow or other issues that are emergency related, not remote learning planning, but emergency days, I believe we could request that our remote learning plan cover those. And in this year, I believe our Regional Office of Education would approve those.
Okay, so is there a difference in the two?
There's a difference in the steps that you would have to take to have a formal e-learning plan approved. And right now, our remote learning plan is probably exactly what the e-learning plan would look like. We're just forced to put something into place right now, so then when we do get back to phase 5 and into a normal, quote-unquote, normal school year, then we would consider what we learned, and then if we want to for future years, then come back to the board with a formal e-learning plan for emergency days for future years.
So we, like you said earlier, we intended to have 2 or 5 days, whatever that was, So we did what I would call brainstorming on it, and we have a rough draft of it, in a sense.
We would
Right.
now, we'd have a good draft that's been thoroughly vetted and used for a portion or all of a school year. So that's the plan we would look at this year, the plan we would adjust, and then when we get back to a normal school year, this remote learning plan that we have, maybe with some changes here or there, would be the plan we would bring to the board and to the public for our formal e-learning plan.
Okay.
Unless, of course, the requirements change over the course of the year after the last spring and this school year, what is needed for an e-learning plan to the state, to be approved by the state, could change.
Because I personally would, I mean, I know you're strapped with time and you spent 24 hours around the clock trying to put us together, if you will. But once we get going, I would hope we're forward-looking to potentially having to go there and not just get caught with, uh-oh.
But this is for emergency days, not if like other districts have flipped to full remote. It's not that, right?
You're telling me, or you're asking me?
I'm kind of telling you, unless someone
Okay,
wants to correct me.
that's okay, either way is fine, just
No,
want to understand.
that is accurate.
Just want
So-
to make sure, because we are, like that, I think was already prepared, but for the 5 days at the end of the calendar, that thing.
So if we go full remote, it's not considered an emergency?
Sounds a little counterintuitive, doesn't it?
Yeah.
By the semantics of the state, yes. We would go to our full remote learning plan. It would not be a state-approved e-learning plan, because the state-approved e-learning plan has to go through different steps from the state. But
Okay.
what we are
now-
doing,
Now, let me put my student's shoes on then.
okay,
I'm a student. Now, you're teaching me something that's not authorized, if you will. So do I get graded for it? I mean, I don't want to get too deep into it, but I'm just trying to understand how
Right.
we're going to move forward if we get to that point, or is it going to be just like last spring? If you got an A right now, you don't have to show up.
yeah, no, right now, we don't have, it's a good question. We don't have any of those obligations or requirements at this point, and we do have a remote learning plan in place, should we have to go to that. And the remote learning plan that we do have has been approved by the ROE to use for this school year. It's just not the state-approved e-learning plan. So I think it's more about semantics right now than it is the plan. The plan is ready and has been updated, and we will share that with parents if and when we end up going, hope we don't have to, but if we do end up going to full remote, that plan is ready, and Dr. Mumm and Mr. Raleigh can share that.
The good feeling behind it is, at the same time, is that we do have our ROE batting for us, too. So,
Yes, and I think the other good
representation-wise.
thing is with being mandated and required to come up with something valuable for our students, a lot of that plan will already be, like you shared, Mr. Rivas, that plan is, the majority of it will be built by and completed for this school year. So by the end of the school year, once we're back to normal phase 5 in a regular school year, the e-learning plan to get approved by the state is pretty much done.
All right, cool, thank you.
You're welcome.
I've got a dumb question. In if reading through some of the notes here, it references the current governor. Do we just need to change it to the governor instead of by name? Like on page 15, about halfway down the page, Illinois Governor Pritzker, Isby, blah, blah, blah. Or do we just leave it, or do we have to come back and change it in the future to?
Good question. I will find that out if that needs to stay that way, because I think we've tried to make our policies as much as possible to be able to transition over time, whether it's a name of a state test or a state mandate, so we can look at that too.
Is this meant to be a reference?
Yeah, the policy ends at the top of page 14.
Yes, usually anything after, it's usually the line, then it says the press plus comments, everything down below there, or after, up at the top of 14 where you see the cross-referencing.
And where I'm going with that is if this is a reference, it's like when
Okay,
you
so
write
it
a
doesn't
report.
matter.
Yes.
You got
So
to
if it-
state directly where it's coming from.
If it's a reference not in the policy itself, it wouldn't be.
Okay.
Thank you for that, Pedro, for Mr. Rivas. Number 17, is okay. That's just a 5-year review. You'll see the areas highlighted in green and pink down at the bottom. One's just deleted, and new references are updated. Student behavior, 7-190,
What page?
page 18,
Thank you.
is where the policy starts. And the question that needs to be answered for this one, if you'll see at the bottom of 20 and the bottom of 21, there are 2 areas highlighted that are reference and language updates, but the question that is in this one is on the very end of page 22. And the question is, does the board allow or prohibit the use of isolated timeout, and physical restraint? The answer to that one, you can see the box checked, is the board allows the use of isolated timeout and physical restraint. But back on page 20, at the bottom, that is highlighted, it says neither isolated timeout or physical restraint should be used as a discipline or to punish a student. So the county, Mid-Valley and Kane County, or Kaneland School District, both allow the use of a isolated timeout and physical restraint as our default for emergency purposes only, not for discipline. So we would never hold a student down or grab a student or physically restrain them as a discipline. It's for safety measures, and the safety measures are allowed in the policy. (7-340) student records. This update, it changes just a little bit of the language, matches state and federal laws. I don't know if anybody had a question on that. Then I believe our last one is 7-345, use of educational technologies, student data privacy and security. Starts on page 25. There's a question on the next page, the top, which is page 26. The district either has to have the superintendent or a board-designated privacy officer. And the question, if you go down the question, the answer is yes. The second yes, a title other than the superintendent. Currently, as our associate superintendent, Dr. Fuchs serves in that role. She directly supervises Mr. Wolf and works more closely with Mr. Wolf than I do. Therefore, Dr. Fuchs is designated as our privacy officer and has been working in that capacity. Any questions? I will bring back a couple of, specifically the one update about our board policy for meetings during this time, and I will make sure I share that in advance so the board has a chance to review it. And there is a recommendation and action.
So we can just make the same motion. I'm just trying to read it through with that.
Yes.
So I'll entertain a motion that the Kaneland Board of Education approve the recommended policy changes from press on first reading. So moved. Okay, Meg, in a second,
I'll second it.
and a roll call.
So, technical question.
Yeah?
If the change is made that I requested, it comes, we're not approving, would it be approved as amended then in the?
That is let me think here, board policy approved.
I mean, it's the recommended policy changes, that's kind of what I was asking too. Does that include Ryan's recommended policy change? Will that be,
It would, because it is noted in here, so if that is.
that's still first
Yep,
reading?
that would be
So I
first
think we're
reading.
okay? Is that
Because
fair?
we will note that as the change.
Okay. That's what- Thank you.
Okay, and a roll call?
Mrs. Barber.
Aye.
Mrs. Junk.
Aye.
Mr. Carey.
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlik.
Aye.
Mr. Rivas.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. We'll move on to the superintendent report.
Yes, just wanted to remind, even though we did it in the calendar update, just remind everybody that Thursday and Friday are remote learning planning days. Monday and Tuesday are Teacher Institute days. Next Wednesday, the 19th, is our Parent Institute Day, which is the first time we've utilized that in a way for our parents to come in and access the building, become acclimated to the building, learn and see and see what our school looks like with social distancing, our schools look like with social distancing. And then next Thursday, the 20th, is our first day of school. That's just as a review. Also wanted to share, typically at our next board meeting on August 31st, or that last meeting in August, we would have our new teachers and new staff members attend that board meeting for a small meet and greet. So what we'll need to do is, with that number that we have, probably divide that number up a little bit over 2 or 3 or 4 board meetings to make sure that we are in complete compliance and practice social distancing and safety. So we'll take a look at that, and if that is something that's not feasible, we'll make sure that either through the KCN or just in the weekly update, we'll make sure that we share a little biography on who our new teachers are, so all of our board members and our entire community can put a name with a face. One other thing that we want to talk about is, and then we're going to have some recommendations that will be coming out shortly. As you know, with the limitations and restrictions on the gatherings, and also those gatherings in conjunction with our cleaning and our updated cleaning materials and supplies and timelines, we're going to do a thorough review of our evening sessions, our evening meetings that are not required. Board meetings are required, so we will host those and have those. But other committee meetings such as FAC, Foundation, Hall of Fame, CAC, we're going to review those meetings, review those dates, look at those numbers, and determine if we should do those via Zoom or if they should be on site based on the action that we have to have. I would just hate to use time and space in our building that either keeps our custodians from doing the work in a timely manner, or to come into a building to possibly bring more germs or take germs home with families, and or changing the cleaning timeline for our custodian staff. So we will look at those, and you may see an accommodation to those, you may see a modification, but we will make sure that we share those accordingly with our committees, and then provide an update to the board also.
Is that going to happen even probably beyond committees, I would imagine?
GTAs and.
Yes, we'll look at all of those. Basically, we'll take the calendar of events, look at those and see which ones that we're going to keep, which that we can still have with a smaller amount based on where they meet, or see which we just need to completely postpone or move to a virtual format. So that's just something that you may see, or you will definitely see and hear more of shortly. Okay. Those were the updates that I had. Dr. Fuchs, did you have anything?
I don't have any tonight, thank you.
Anything from the board?
Can I ask a question in reference to the visit from the parents? Is that by appointment? I mean, it's probably been shared before, I don't recall.
Next Wednesday, the 19th?
Yeah, when they come, is
Yes.
that by appointment only, or what?
Yeah, there are appointments, not individual appointment one-on-one, but either appointments to make sure that they keep track of how many people are coming in, and also either by grade level or by alphabet. It'll be organized to ensure that we follow social distancing for those open house tours.
Thank you.
Yep, looks very, very different this year.
It looks like we might have missed this on the agenda, but we have topics for future agendas. Should we go there next?
That wasn't intentional.
I know. I'm like, wait, nothing? All right. But
It's more of a question, but, you know, our resource officer got reassigned, right? To duty, whatever he or she's doing, at the high school wise.
Okay.
I assume we're in tune with them as to when we need them back, and is there gonna be gaps?
Yes.
Guess
I mean,
what?
Wait, yes, 2 questions. Yes, we're in tune to it. No, there won't be gaps.
All right,
Because
cool.
that's what typically happens every summer, that they're redeployed back to their assignment, and then when school starts, they come back on site and follow the school schedule.
Yeah, I lost track of time, you're right.
Yeah,
right.
no.
Coming out of summer.
Yes.
He actually attended our first responder meeting
Did he? Okay.
last week, so,
Awesome,
yep,
awesome.
he's
Great
ready to go. And I've given the sheriff's office the schedule. They're gonna do traffic control 5 days a week because we don't have late start Thursdays. So they'll be here Monday through Friday in the mornings with an extra call.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
great.
Just because I know you guys haven't been doing anything the last month or two, at some point I'd like to hear what the plan is whenever we do get forced into fully remote, of how that'll work out.
Speak up.
Fully remote plan. Yeah.
Yeah, I said at some point I have a feeling we're gonna get forced into fully remote, and I'd like to hear what the plan is for that at some point in the future.
All All right, and is there, or I guess thumbs up,
Yep, I
thumbs
want
down,
to make sure we
sorry.
have,
I
I would
almost,
imagine we do, but want to follow
What's
consensus.
this?
thumbs up, thumbs down, I almost skipped right over that.
For what?
For the Ryan's topic for future.
Oh, yeah.
A full
I know.
vote, full
Yeah.
vote update.
I almost blew
I'm
right
sure
by it.
Todd already has it on his pillow.
I know.
Yeah.
All right, so second opportunity for public comment. All right, see none. We do have closed session tonight. So there'll be no action taken following the session, therefore following the vote to go into closed session, the recording of tonight's meeting will be concluded. Tonight's closed session is for Illinois Code 122C2. Is there a motion to go into closed session?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
And a roll call?
Mrs. Junk?
Aye.
Mr. Carey?
Aye.
Mrs. Pavlak?
Aye.
Mr. Rivas?
Aye.
Mrs. Farber?
Aye. Motion carries.